So guys, before I begin, if you can, please like this video, please share with others, and also drop a comment below. I'd really appreciate it. So this story I'm going to cover now, it's one from a couple of years ago, but it's going to go in depth, and it's part one of a two-part series that I'm going to do. So part two is going to be released tomorrow. That's going to be the revenge of what actually happened in this case. So the night was cold, and the streets of the Meadows in Nottingham were eerily quiet, as if the neighbourhood itself was holding its breath in anticipation. This was a place that had long been scarred by violence, the kind of violence that coursed through its veins like a poison that refused to be purged. Gangs, drugs, and power struggles had taken over, each one vying for control of the streets, leaving the residents to wonder if they would ever see peace again. But amidst the tension, there was one man who had earned a reputation for trying to make a difference, for being the calm in the storm, a man whose death would shake the entire community to its core. Michael Anton O'Connor was that man. Michael, he was known to many as a friend and a fixture of the local community, and he had always stood out. He wasn't just another person trying to survive the chaos of his surroundings. He was someone who genuinely cared about the people around him. His role in the Meadows wasn't one of violence, nor did he have any ties to the drug-dealing gangs that ruled the streets. Michael had carved out a niche for himself as a peacemaker, a bridge between two groups that had long been at war. It was this very quality that earned him the trust of those around him, but it was also what made him a target. To many in the area, Michael was a calm, unassuming man, always ready to help others or lend a ear to someone in need. He didn't belong to the gangs, didn't participate in the violence that marred his neighbourhood, yet he had become known as someone who could bring two opposing sides together. His efforts are often quiet but always impactful. He tried to resolve the escalating tensions between the rival drug factions, hoping that by creating dialogue, he could prevent bloodshed. Little did he know, his involvement would place him in the most dangerous position of all. So at the heart of the Meadows, there was a war. A brutal, unrelenting war between two rival organised crime groups who were fighting for control of the drug trade. Both factions had their roots in the area, and their conflict was so entrenched that it seemed like an inevitable part of life. Power, money and territory were at the stakes, and the people who lived in the shadows of violence paid the price. The war between these two criminal empires had reached a fever pitch in the months leading up to Michael's death. Tensions ran high, and the violence escalated. Each gang tried to outdo the other, using any means necessary to protect their territory and assets. As the chaos unfolded, the casualties grew. Some were directly involved in the gangs, others were innocent bystanders caught in the crossfire. Michael, as a trusted intermediary, had been approached by one of the gang leaders. They had hoped that he could mediate between the two sides and bring about a truce, an impossible task given the deep-seated hatred between the factions. Still, Michael took on the responsibility, his belief in peace and his sense of justice propelling him forward. He was driven by the hope that if he could just get the leaders of the two gangs to listen to each other, he might be able to avert disaster. But as it so often happens in the world of organised crime, there was no room for peace. November the 10th, 2021 was a date that would forever be etched in the minds of everyone in the Meadows. It began like any other day, with the usual hum of life in the community, but in the shadows the gears of an unimaginable tragedy were already set into motion. Michael, oblivious to the impending danger, made his way to a pre-arranged meeting with the leader of a rival gang. He had been sent by his contact, a well-known drugs kingpin, who believed that Michael could help calm the rising tensions between the two sides. Michael had no reason to suspect that the meeting would be anything other than a discussion, one that might ease the conflict and prevent more deaths. But he was wrong. As Michael arrived at the meeting spot on Wilford Crescent West, a street he knew all too well, he was unaware he was walking into a carefully planned trap. The gang that had been plotting his demise had mistaken him for their primary target, the drug kingpin whom Michael was supposed to meet. To them, Michael was just another pawn, a man they could eliminate without hesitation, thinking they were striking a blow to their enemy. They thought that they were attacking the kingpin. The men who would carry out the murder were heavily armed with knives, guns, axes and hammers, and the violence had been so commonplace in the Meadows was now taking its most devastating form. These men were not interested in diplomacy, they were interested only in bloodshed, and on this fateful night it was Michael who would pay the price. The ambush was swift and ruthless. Michael, unarmed and unaware of the danger, was confronted by a group of masked men. The attackers were quick, efficient and relentless. They surrounded Michael, blocking any chance of escape, and began their assault. He fought back using his bare hands, trying to protect himself, but the odds were stacked against him. The killers had come from Manchester to carry out the murder. They were not there to negotiate, they were there to kill, and they had no qualms about who stood in their way. In the midst of the fray, it was Michael Mingoes who plunged the knife into Michael O'Connor's chest. The blade found its mark and Michael fell to the ground, his life draining away as the men who attacked him fled into the night. The cold reality of Michael's death hit the community like a shockwave. This was no random act of violence. This was a targeted, premeditated murder that had been orchestrated by some of the most dangerous people in the city. Michael's death was senseless. He had done nothing to deserve such a fate. He'd been trying to prevent the very thing that had killed him. The investigation to Michael's murder was launched immediately, and it quickly became clear that this was no ordinary case. The brutality of the attack, the involvement of multiple people, and the links to organised crime pointed to a sophisticated and well-planned hit. Detectives worked around the clock, poring over surveillance footage, gathering mobile phone data, and interviewing witnesses. Slowly but surely the pieces of the puzzle began to come together. The police uncovered a web of lies, betrayal and manipulation. They traced the movements of the individuals involved, and through the evidence they were able to build a detailed picture of the events leading up to Michael's death. It was revealed that Michael had been sent to Wilford Crescent West by the drugs kingpin he worked with, but instead of finding a resolution to the conflict, he had walked right into the jaws of a carefully laid trap. The hitmen included Michael Mingoes, Joseph Boscombe and Joshua Agboola, had been hired to carry out the murder. They had come from Manchester, having been sent by Benjamin Taylor, the mastermind behind the plan. It was clear that the intention had never been to kill Michael, it had been to kill the rival drugs lord, but Michael had been mistaken for the target, and his death was the result of that tragic error. As the investigation progressed, it became evident that the gang responsible for the murder was not acting alone. There were multiple people involved in the conspiracy, each playing a role in the plot. Carla McGuire, who lived near the scene of the crime, was accused of turning off the CCTV cameras to prevent the attack from being recorded. Leonard Ward, the head of a rival gang, had played a central role in orchestrating it, and Paula Usherwood, who had been involved in setting up the ambush, was one of the key players in the plot. As I said, tomorrow I'm going to be releasing part 2 with regards to the revenge, and Paula Usherwood features in that because literally moments after Michael was killed, Paula Usherwood had a gun put to her head, but the gun jammed. So as I said, we'll go through that tomorrow. The authorities worked tirelessly to gather the evidence needed to bring the killers to justice. And when the trial began in October 2022, it became clear that the murder was not the work of a single person. It was the result of a carefully orchestrated conspiracy involving multiple individuals. Each defendant had their role to play, and together they had ensured Michael's tragic end. So the trial of the 9 individuals accused of Michael O'Connor's murder was a turning point not just in legal proceedings but for the community of the Meadows. The case captivated not only Nottingham but the wider public as the shocking details of the murder unfolded in court. The atmosphere in the courtroom was tense, with emotions running high. The atmosphere in the courtroom was intense, with emotions running high as the prosecution began to lay out its case. It was a complex, harrowing tale of betrayal, manipulation, and violence that no one in the community could have predicted. The courtroom became a stage where the disturbing realities of organised crime were brought to light as each defendant's involvements were scrutinised in minute detail. As the trial opened in October 2022, the prosecutor, Adrian Langdale KC, painted a vivid picture of the events leading up to Michael's death, revealing the cold and calculated nature of the crime. Langdale's opening statements described Michael O'Connor as a man of integrity, someone who had been deeply committed to resolving tensions between two rival gangs. Instead of finding peace, Michael had walked directly into an ambush, a brutal, premeditated attack meant for someone else. The prosecution's case centred on the fact that Michael had been sent to Wilford Crescent West on the night of the murder under the pretence of mediating between the feuding criminal factions. He had gone armed, not knowing that the meeting would turn deadly. The real target, the kingpin, had been one of the people that the killers had intended to intimidate and eliminate. However, in a cruel twist of fate, Michael had been mistaken for the kingpin and the murder was carried out in terrifying precision. The details of the ambush were harrowing. Michael was confronted by the group men, masked and heavily armed. The attackers had arrived, as I said, from Manchester, a carefully orchestrated move designed to ensure that the murder was executed efficiently and without mercy. And this gang were intent on only one thing, which was the killing. The prosecutor's words hit the courtroom with the force of a hammer. The victim of this crime were not just the people who had known Michael, but the entire community had been forced to live the consequences of an escalated drugs war. Michael Mingoes, one of the key defendants, was alleged to have been the one who delivered the fatal blow. As the prosecution delved into the investigation, they revealed how the killers had attempted to cover their tracks. The CCTV footage that had been carefully deleted, the lies told to the police, and the efforts to dispose of incriminating evidence all painted a picture of people not just involved in the murder, but in an intricate conspiracy to hide their involvement. The jury listened attentively, taking in the complex details of the case as the prosecution presented their evidence. The mobile phone records which linked the suspects to one another showed a pattern of communication the days and hours leading up to the murder which were crucial. The investigation revealed how individuals like Paula Usherwood, who had seemingly tried to mediate between the gangs, had been involved in setting up the ambush. The evidence was damning, showing how the entire plot had been orchestrated with chilling precision. One of the most disturbing aspects of the trial was the way in which the killers had acted in the aftermath of the murder. They showed no remorse, no hint of guilt, and instead of attempting to deceive the police, even going so as far as to remove crucial evidence. The defence tried to argue that their clients had no direct role in the murder, but the evidence was irrefutable. The conspiracy was clear, and the involvement of each deck was well documented. An emotional testimony from Michael's family added a deeply personal and tragic layer to the trial. His relatives spoke of the man. They had lost someone who had been a beacon of hope in the community that had been overshadowed by violence. His family described the pain of losing someone who had tried to bring people together, who had cared deeply for his neighbourhood, and who had believed in peace when it seemed impossible. So let's go through a little bit of with regards to the people that were convicted and the roles of them. So you got Benjamin Taylor. He was a Manchester drug dealer, and according to the prosecution, he frequently paid and arranged for the defendant, Gemma Farron, to make trips from Manchester to Nottingham to deliver wholesale quantities of drugs to Leonard Ward. The prosecution would say that more salient is the pattern of calls between Leonard Ward and Benjamin Taylor. Benjamin Taylor was being kept in the loop over the deteriorating situation in Nottingham. Ward arranged for Taylor to send a team from Manchester to act as a hit squad, which was headed by Joseph Boscombe, which included Joshua Agboola and Michael Mingoes. Part of the hit team would be driven by Farron. So Benjamin Taylor, he got found guilty of murder. And then you got Leonard Ward. By his own admission, Ward was selling high-grade cannabis called Cali from California at the time of Mr. O'Connor's death. Prosecutor Adrian Langdale KC had told the jury there was no doubt he was a significant dealer of drugs. Langdale said this was predominantly a war about Class A drugs. This was a war about crack and heroin and not cannabis. Ward shed some light on what was rumbling in the background in the Meadows. He said in an interview a group of lads was bullying everyone. People had been getting guns pulled on them and knives pulled on them. He eventually accepted the person he was referring to in all this was the rival dealer. Ward, who was brought up in St Anne's, denied his evidence to the jury that he was the head of an organised crime group. He also got guilty of murder. Then you got Jerome Sheard. He was the partner of the defendant, Kerry Ann Shepherd. The prosecution has suggested Sheard was the right-hand man at the top of the OCG with Leonard Ward. Sheard, a joiner from Alfreton in Derbyshire, was directly in contact with members of the hit team, it was alleged. Sheard organised for Ward's upstream supplier Taylor to send the team from Manchester. But Sheard told the jury in his evidence it would be a ridiculous idea when asked about being an alleged party to set up a rival dealer to be ambushed. Then you got guilty murder. Michael Mingoes is said to be the one that stabbed Mr. O'Connor. He denied ever holding a knife, and he's said to have been produced by Mr. O'Connor or making a stabbing motion. He was only 20 years old, and he said that his parents were religious and strict, and he got a scholarship to go to a private school, and he did well. But then one day when he was 16, he was stabbed and left with a scar on his head. However, the jury also found out at the time he told the hospital he was injured as a result of playing football. He said he got paranoid as a result of the attack and took a year out of college. He got mixed up with criminals in Rusholme in Manchester dealing drugs, and then Mingo started dealing when he was 18 and worked for a man called Bones. But Bones had then sacked him, and he confided in the defendant Boscombe about his financial difficulties, and he ended up owing Boscombe money. Boscombe, he said, contacted him about needing a runner in Nottingham, and this was his opportunity to work on the line. Mingoes got done for murder. Then you got Joseph Boscombe. He came to Nottingham, and he was driven there by Gemma Fear, and he was in the company of Mingoes and Joshua Agboola, and his case was his actions were in relation to drugs and not violence or threats of violence. He was the one who directed Mingoes to hand himself to the police with a prepared statement. Mingoes had told the jury he was afraid to go back to Boscombe when police declined to take him back into custody. Jerome Sheard's evidence was Boscombe came to Nottingham to supply cannabis, but the prosecution said there was no drug relationship between Boscombe and Jerome Sheard before. He said suggestions that there was such a relationship was made up in order to disguise the truth of the visit, which was not a routine delivery, but on the prosecution's case, the delivery of the hit squad. The prosecution also said that Boscombe was one of the ones who went out with Jerome Sheard and later on was on one of the bikes, which was part of what prosecution said was a reconnaissance mission. As part of the planned attack, the defence said that these trips were more likely to be visits to drug dealing spots. The prosecution also said that Boscombe was the man who assaulted another man, Jack Coxon. Mr. Coxon encountered masked men who attacked him near to where the killing had happened. Boscombe, he also got guilty of murder. Then you got Joshua Agboola, said he was one of the 3 men recruited by Benjamin Taylor to attack the rival dealer, and they also alleged on the evidence that Michael McGuire, Agboola, was a Class A drug dealer and a friend of Boscombe. He was on the reconnaissance trip of bicycles for the ambush that was to follow. Agboola wore a balaclava and was in the company of Michael McGuire, and he, along with others, was allegedly one of those who surrounded and blocked Mr. O'Connor, and was doing this at the same time Mr. O'Connor was stabbed to death. He was also found guilty of murder. Then you got Carla McGuire. Her address was home to the sons Michael McGuire, who ran the MI line, and Curtis Sheard. A third son, Jerome Sheard, was registered to same address for the murder. The address was the meeting point for some of the defendants, including the hit team sent from Manchester. And minutes before the killing, the CCTV at the house was turned off, and prosecutors said Carla McGuire controlled the CCTV from her phone. The trial also heard she told police at the scene the camera was a dummy, and this was not true. She got done for murder as well. And then you got Paula Usherwood. Usherwood was Carla McGuire's niece, and she set up her phone to link to the newly CCTV at the house. She was present on the 26th of October 2021 at the Poets Corner pub when there was a Clear the Air meeting. She was seen approaching the rival dealer at the time. Prosecution said this was the setting up of the ambush. The defence suggested she was not luring him but warning him to stay away. Later that day, she visited an address at Wilford Crescent West after the Manchester men arrived, and she was in repeated phone contact with Jerome Sheard, Leonard Ward, and a third male in the aftermath of the alleyway stabbing. She was outside on the bikes for the Manchester men being arranged. She was in contact with a rival dealer. The prosecution says this was to confirm the meeting was still on. She allegedly drove Michael McGuire and the three men from Manchester to Bosworth Walk. She allegedly drove back at what appeared to be at some considerable speed, and Mr. O'Connor was seen to be walking in the opposite direction. The 4 passengers were dropped off. She also got done for murder. And then you got Michael McGuire. Prosecution said he was the controller of the MI line and he was there to receive the men from Manchester at his home. He got done for murder. So the sentencings are as follows. Michael McGuire got 32 years. Paula Usherwood got 30 years. Jerome Sheard got 31 years. Michael Mingoes got 28 years. Carla McGuire got 20 years. Joshua Agboola got 31 years. Joseph Boscombe got 32 years. Leonard Ward got 32 years. And Benjamin Taylor got 32 years. As Michael's family and friends walked out of the courtroom, their steps heavy with grief, but resolute with the knowledge that Michael had not died in vain, they knew that there was more to be done. The drugs, the violence, the gangs, they would continue to tear at the fabric of the world Michael had fought so hard to protect. But his death would serve as a rallying cry, a testament to the fact that even in the face of unimaginable evil, the pursuit of justice was unyielding. And perhaps, just perhaps, his death would finally start to change he had so desperately wanted to see, a world where no one had to die for trying to bring peace to the chaos. But that change, that reckoning, would not come easy, it never does. And as the sun began to set over the meadows, the shadows stretched long, haunting every corner, every alley, every life touched by the dark reality of a world where violence and hatred too often took centre stage. Michael O'Connor was gone, but his fight for a better world, a world where peace could triumph over chaos, was far from over. And in the end, it was Michael's spirit that would live on, not in the walls of the courtroom or in the prison cell of his killers, but in the hearts of those who remembered him, a peacemaker in a world that had long forgotten how to make peace. In that Michael O'Connor's legacy was sealed. His fight for justice, quest for peace would never be forgotten, and it would live on in the memories of everyone who had been touched by his courage. Even in the darkest, tough times, his light would shine forever. Rest in peace, Michael. As I said, guys, tomorrow I'm going to be putting out part 2, which was regards to the revenge of the killing of Michael.